Welcome to Leaders of Africa Presents with a live conversation and survey launch for the nationwide Higher Education Aspirations Survey in Cameroon. My name is Etta Aki, and I am the Associate Executive Director of Leaders of Africa and the co-host for today's important event. We're excited to have a lively conversation about the state of higher education in Cameroon, as well as the way forward. We want to stress that many things are working today, and it's important to recognize that. There is also always room for improvement, so we will discuss this as well. Before we introduce our guests and jump right into the conversation, we want to debut for you, for the first showing, the official video for the Higher Education Aspirations Survey produced by the Leaders of Africa Media Lab with videography done by Dr. Etta Aki.
Things that you can face at the university in pursuit of your aspirations. For instance, do admission boards match you with your desired program? Does the university offer mentorship and support?
Hello, I am Dr. Etta Aki. I am the Vice Dean in charge of Studies and Student Affairs in the Faculty of Education, University of Buea, Cameroon.
It is important that you as a student have a voice in university life, as it is crucial for your career and personal ambitions.
Firstly, I will start by saying that students need support from the beginning.
The very first one is the inadequate learning facilities. Considering that the learners are so many and the classes are small, we find it difficult to study in those classes.
And even if you have a place to sit, the lecturer might speak and you may not hear if you are far behind.
The Higher Education Aspirations Survey allows you to comment on admission policies, student support, the quality of education, strengths of the institution, as well as areas for improvement, affordability, career aspirations, and much more. All Cameroonian students can share their voice on the survey. It is a nationwide survey, so all universities are welcome. English and French version of the survey are available. Bienvenue. And follow some of the results in real time through the survey platform. You may complete the survey on any device, including your mobile phones.
Your voice is therefore critical in understanding how we can reform admission policies and also support all students to achieve their dreams. Join me in the Higher Educations Project.
To share your voice, go to leadersofafrica.org/aspirations. Let's make higher education in Cameroon the best in the world.
As we get into the conversation, I want to introduce the Executive Director of Leaders of Africa, Professor Eva Penner, who will be co-hosting alongside with me today.
Welcome to you all today. Thank you, Violet, for the introduction. I'm pleased to introduce a present scholar at the Leaders of Africa Institute and an innovator in higher education in Cameroon, and I would argue the African continent. Dr. Etta Aki is the Vice Dean for Studies and Student Affairs in the Faculty of Education at the University of Buea. She is the Principal Investigator for the Higher Education Aspirations Project, which we're going to be talking about in today's session. We are also joined by Professor Valentine Bafanga, who is a professor at the University of Buea, where he is the Chair of Philosophy in Higher Teacher Training College and Educational Foundations in the Faculty of Education. Welcome to you. And next we have Dr. Felicitas Dr Mccomb, who wears many hats, including that of Executive Vice Provost, the Director of Ubiquitous Campus, and the Dean of the School of Information Technology at the Catholic University Institute at Buea. Lastly, we have Dr. Shaibo Haji, a lecturer at the University of Yaoundé 1. He is in the Department of Curriculum and Evaluation in the Faculty of Education. Welcome to you all. It's so good for you to be with us today on Leaders of Africa Presents. as much as we may have internet connectivity difficulties, we'll be able to pop in and out. So we're going to continue through those little minor disruptions here and there, as we can never control those, as we know from some of our e-learning and online exploits that we've been engaged in the past few weeks and months. So I want to start off with the first topic of today's discussion, and that's the admissions process at universities. And obviously, the admissions process across countries of Africa varies significantly. And in Cameroon, there is an admissions process for public universities as well as private universities. And I want to talk about that, because one of the things that students often do when they're applying to university is they give the university choices of their programs, right? What do they want to study? What are your top 3 choices? Other countries, it's top 2 choices or up to top 5 choices. It varies. But in Cameroon, ask you, what are your top 3 choices? And obviously, some students get their one of their top 3 choices of programs, but some students do not. And I want to start with you, Dr. Aki, Etta Aki. Tell us a little bit about this. How prevalent of a concern is this potential for a mismatch between what a student puts on their application and the actual program that they get into?
Okay, thank you, Prof. Penner. Yes, just like you said, the admission process differs per country. And in my country, Cameroon, I think that the differences are even larger because we operate a bilingual system. So the admission process in the dominantly French-speaking area is different from that of the English-speaking area. And in both sectors, they are equally different in terms of the type of universities, that is public and private universities. So I can talk very well about the university in which I am part of, which is the University of Buea. It is located in the English-speaking region of the country, and it's Anglo-Saxon. It's an Anglo-Saxon university, and it's also a public university. And students at the time of applications are given the options to choose 3 subjects of their choice. And when we talk about students' choices, it could incorporate so many things. They could be making these choices based on their family counsel from their family members. They could be making these choices based on their prior performances from high school. They could be making these choices based on counsel from some counselor or from some teacher, or just basically based on passion or even influence from peers. It could come from just anywhere. However, when students make these choices, the admission board is charged with making the final decision as to who gets into what. And so what usually happens is the admission board will look at the first choice that the student has made. If they meet the eligibility criteria for entry, they will be admitted. If not, then they will move on to the second choice. If they meet, they will be admitted. If not, they will move on to the third choice. If they meet, they will be admitted. Sorry. But what happens if these students do not meet any of these choices? The tendency is they will be sent to do some other program, study some other program which they never applied for. For some of these students, it is good, because it's an opportunity to get into the university. For others, it is a total contrast to what they wanted to study and the dropout. So we have 2 scenarios here. A first scenario where students persist. They are likely to accept these programs and continue in it, and others where these students can drop out. And we know from research that motivation is a key influencer of learning. When we are motivated to learn, when there is a good reason behind why we are participating in any activity, even beyond learning, we can be able to achieve, we can be able to produce, we become more productive. And so it is very likely that when students are engaged in a learning program that they never applied for, their motivational levels will drop or may drop.
Thank you very much, Dr. Etta. That was a really great explanation, and it does provide a lot of insight into what goes on during the admissions process. Now, you did touch on some of the things, or the influences that eventually factor into how students end up into certain programs or the programs that they study. And I'm curious to know about these informed decisions, a lot more about the informed decisions that students eventually take up when they're getting into these programs. And I would like to hear from Dr. Mccomb. When it comes to these selections of the programs, how informed are the students? And do they listen to certain people about the decisions they make, such as mentors? What exactly goes on in this process?
Thank you. How good is my sound? Is it okay? Or should I?
Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's great to be a part of this experience today. Thank you for the invitation. So I'm actually at the Catholic University Institute of Buea, and we're actually a private university that's actually mentored by the University of Buea. Now, in Cameroon, the idea of mentorship is basically that the private universities are always linked to one public university, almost for the duration of their existence. The idea is that at some point you will become autonomous, but for the most part, they are linked to a university that acts sort of like a mentor for the duration of their existence. And basically, I am also in information technology, in IT. And we know what has happened in the last year with COVID, with IT becoming even a much more prominent field than it was even before last year. So this academic year, for instance, I can almost say that more than 30% of the students who are coming into IT, into my area, are coming because somebody told them about it, or they heard about it, or they know that that is where the world is going, or their parents are like, it's IT or nothing. That's it. You must do that. So we realized that from the very onset, when we were going through the orientation process at the beginning of the semester, we realized that a lot of them are not personally excited about IT. It's coming from somewhere, some influence from somebody else. Now, what we try to do with the students that we think may help, and we've seen that help in the past, is that we try to link to them, like in their mind. Like if, for example, you wanted to do marketing, or you wanted to do music, or you wanted to do something else, we try to show them the link between IT and practically everything, to show them that regardless of what you have as your passion, having experience.
We're losing Dr. Mccomb there, but I think she'll be back in a minute when her internet becomes stable. Like we said, sometimes some of us may keep dropping in or out, but please hang in there. And I think I'll just go straight to the next question, unless someone else wanted to chime in on that as well. Okay, I think we lost Dr. Mccomb completely. Dr. Valentine, did I hear you say something?
I'm back, sorry.
Thank you, she's back.
Yeah, I don't know where you lost me. But nevertheless, what I was saying was we try to show them the link between information technology and other fields, so that even if you were passionate about doing something in particular, knowing that IT is sort of foundational or relevant to every field can help you decide. But I do agree with Dr. Etta that nowadays there's a lot of influence from many, many others. And one of the things that should probably agree with me is that one of the disconnects we have in Cameroon especially is that so far early on in education, I think it's Form 3, students have to pick one thing, have to pick one side, maybe voluntarily or maybe because your teachers think that you're better at arts versus science versus commercial. And so you pick a track so early when you're 13 years old, when you don't really know anything about what you really want. And when you get to university, something excites you, but all of a sudden now you don't have the necessary background for it, or you don't feel like you can do it. You don't have the confidence for it. So I think those are some of the challenges that we see.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Just building on that, Professor Valentine, have you also seen that amongst your students? When you think about the students that enter the programs that you administer, that you oversee, at the University of Buea. Do you see a similar thing? How are students deciding to go in the direction of your area of interest as opposed to others that they could pursue?
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I think what Dr. Etta said is very relevant, but I would like to look at it from the 3 levels of admission, that is from the undergraduate, the master's, and the PhD, because there may be some differences with regard to that. At the undergraduate level, I don't think there is a big deal. Most of the students, they undergo counseling services and then career orientation, and then they may understand some come as a result of influence from parents and peers, as we said. And here we have schools of concours. Cameroon is a context where concours plays a very big role. And since some easily get direct admission into public service through those concours, they write, and some even realize themselves when they are already in their professional schools, whether this is their profession. That's also one of the key things. Because the motivation may be different, but it may not necessarily be their interest. At the level of masters, I think in the context of Buea, it is becoming a bit very rigid. And there are certain factors that are taken into considerations, whether we have the necessary human resources, we have the necessary supervisors to cater for, because I'm running a program where I haven't even started. I have a PhD program as well, and I've had difficulties getting students who are passionately interested. There seem to be a myriad of opportunities with these, because it gives you double advantages. That is, you go philosophical as well as social sciences. When you take educational foundations, you have double advantages, and some persons are very, very much interested, but unfortunately, Cameroon has not really prepared persons for the specialty of philosophy of education, and many students are really frustrated for the past 2 years with regard to admission into this program. It has really been a serious problem, and you may find some of those programs like that. But at times, what baffles me is that we seem not to hire expertise that could give assistance to some of these difficulties, because I think hiring expertise would solve that problem without necessarily depriving people the opportunity. And particularly, this is a paid program, for example. So it really becomes intriguing. That is the situation. But I think at the undergraduate level, there's not so much big deal. What I think I can underline there is the condition of language proficiency that comes in. You are expected to have English ordinary level to be accepted in an Anglo-Saxon university. And I think that's not the case in the French-speaking universities. And also particular grades for particular and other prerequisites. But I have a problem with some prerequisites, because we cannot say for certain what somebody's capacity is. We cannot be very sure. I have friends who did philosophy and they ended up being IT engineers. Some of them are online listening to me. We cannot be very sure with people's capacities.
Yeah.
We cannot, and because of that, we cannot constrain people to get into programs because of the, we have people with philosophy, they have tried to enter into the programs of psychology at the doctorate and they are being refused. I think there is a problem with that refusal, in my opinion. I have a contrary opinion to those people who think that it doesn't fit into the program. We have to leave people, the programs have to be flexible. They have to be flexible to give people the opportunities to express their ingenuity. Yeah. So that is my own perception of the situation in the University of Buea.
Wonderful. And one of the things that you mentioned there was, or at least alluded to, is that some programs are older than other programs, right? Some programs have been established for a long time. People know about them. There's a record of alumni. There's a record of success, perhaps, that emanates from those programs. But my understanding is also there are a lot of new programs coming up, right? Programs that are either in the concept phase, right? They haven't rolled out yet, but they're about to roll out. Some that have just rolled out, and then some that are being staffed, right? That they've come out, they've rolled them out. You're testing the waters. They're now admitting students. And one of the questions that I have, and I want to go to you, Dr. Etta, on this, is that do you see this? Do you see sort of these different programs? And does that also correspond perhaps to the level of prestige? Because I can imagine that a program that's been around for a long time is one that perhaps has a little bit more prestige. People know what to expect. But that newer program, imagine you get into that program for university, you don't really know what to expect. And you're telling your friends, who are around you, I got into this program, and they're saying, I don't know that program. It's a brand new program. So what do you see there? What do you see from students? Do you see this sort of variation between the prestige and the amount of time that a program's being around? And how do students really react to that?
Yes, Prof. There are two issues here. The issue of a program being new, and then one of low prestige. When programs are new and students do not know much about it, the tendency is they don't solicit for such programs. But these programs must run. And structurally, the university curbs these kinds of problems by sending students who did not meet eligibility criteria for other prestigious programs or other programs they had interest in into these new programs. That is the first thing. Secondly, it's a similar issue with programs that have a very low prestige. And I want to say, it may not be the case for us all, but I want to say educational sciences is one of such programs. And why? The tendency is anybody who comes to study any of the programs in the sphere of educational sciences is being prepared to become a teacher. And just the ideology of being a teacher is something most of our students do not want to identify themselves with. I remember in one of my classes, it was a new program. And of course, it also was characterized by low prestige. And my students were told that they were going to become head teachers. Head teachers mean leaders at the basic level, or leaders in primary schools. And they were like, what? You go to the university, this high level of education, only to end up as a head teacher so you see how prestige affected, and many of them dropped out just based on the thought. First, they didn't know why they were sent to those programs. They had not accepted that, and now they were told that the outcome of such a program is being a head teacher, and they could not take it. So we have these two things that are there, and so students either shy away from these programs, while others think that some of these programs, like that in education, are very easy. And so you come there, in 3 years, you can easily get your degree and go by. And nobody wants to, again, many people do not want to identify themselves with things that are just too easy, that it feels like, okay, you didn't even have to struggle for it. So we have all of these factors that affect the prestige of a program.
Absolutely. And I saw you nodding your head, Dr. Haji. Do you want to chime in on some of what Dr. Etta was saying? I could see you nodding quite a bit when she was speaking there.
Yeah. Myself and Dr. Aki, we did undergraduate together, so all what she says, I know what is happening in the University of Buea. But I will just go back to what Prof. Valentine said and what Dr. Aki previously said on the issue of admission. When you look at the higher education sphere here, we have purely Anglo-Saxon university, that's University of Buea and Bamenda. The admission requirement is somehow strict compared to the Francophone, as well as University of Yaoundé 1 is a bilingual university. So the admission is really open. So students get into program of their choice. There is no like going under the files to maybe restrict students from doing certain courses. The challenges is that the end of an academic year, depending on the student's performance, so the student drop out on their own, while some of the students just move ahead. But for the University of Buea, if you go through education in English language and you fail to obtain ordinary level English, the University of Buea is not a place for you. If you want to go to the Faculty of Science in the University of Buea, if you don't have ordinary level mathematics, that's another thing. It's not a place for you. So when you have a background in sciences, the only options that you have is we'll send you to the Faculty of Education for you to do, maybe if you have to do chemistry, then you have to do education chemistry, biology, education biology, so that you know that you end up teaching the subject, not going into the field of sciences per se. So those are some of the challenges that students are having, especially in the English subsystem.
Thank you, Dr. Shaibo. Dr. Etta did mention earlier that when students get into programs for which they did not want to get in the first place, many times they drop out, for example, the education sciences one. And then Dr. Mccomb said earlier that what they usually try to do is try to show linkages between what the student has chosen to study versus what they might have originally wanted to study, so that they can see the value of continuing with the program and seeing it through. So I'm curious your thoughts, Dr. Shaibo, about this when it comes to the quality of students and the enthusiasm after they get into the program, and maybe it wasn't their program of choice. How does the program choice influence real and perceived motivations to continue with their education, despite all these efforts that, different professors are putting into the process as much as they can with how much resources they can?
Okay. With respect to that, when I want to talk to like the situation of Catholic University, the number of students that they admit is not much. But when you compare to public university, the first thing is a department will admit 2,000 or 3,000 students. So it's difficult to do a follow-up for you to be able to know the passion of the student, to link what they are doing with respect to what they really want to do. In the University of Yaoundé per se, there are departments that you have like 3,000 students. Let me say undergraduate in geography, 3,000 students will enroll. And most of the time you can see 1,000 or 1,500 attending classes. So it's really difficult to control them at that beginning. But as they progress, at the end of a semester, some of them will know why they are there. Some of them are more optimistic students. So these different students have their interests. But as I said, the number of students also influence the decision. The state universities are always overpopulated. It's always difficult to control the students. But in terms of orientation, some ex-students from high school usually go to schools and give orientation to the students. So that one influences students' program better than even the university, because admission is usually done after their high schools. So the people who receive some orientation from the high school seniors are mostly in a better position to do things in the university.
Thank you. I'm curious your thoughts, Professor Valentine, on this.
Yeah, I think presently we have some initiatives. I will call them initiatives of career orientation. One of my colleagues, Dr. Faili Lian, she carries out an initiative where she moves around the schools and gathers people to give students who are about to complete high school some career orientation so that they can understand how to get into the university, because some are really lost. And Dr. Shaibo raised something very interesting with regard to prerequisites. I have a problem with prerequisites. Maybe because of my philosophical background. We cannot be very certain about what people are capable of doing. Here, we give a condition that if you don't have ordinary level mathematics, you can study economics in the university. This is unacceptable. Economics is not mathematics. And then we say, if you don't have mathematics, you won't study science. This is unacceptable. Science is not mathematics. I took part in a certain session with some experts on curriculum training with some experts from Israel, and mathematics is not a prerequisite for any studies in Israel. We may just frustrate, and students may fail some of these subjects, not because they don't have the capacity, but because of teaching, the method of teaching. There are many factors to be taken into consideration. So when we put some of these prerequisites, we really frustrate many children from getting their dreams. And I see that happening so much in my own context. Yeah. I often bring that up in teaching philosophy of education. I bring that up as some of the things that we have to revisit. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think this goes to what Professor Mccomb said as well, is that some students, they kind of come up with what they want to do a lot later in life, or we could also argue that they peak at different times, right? Not everyone flourishes when they're in the secondary education setting. Some need that university setting, away, perhaps a little bit away from home in some cases, to flourish, perhaps. Go over to you, Violet.
I agree with that, Peter. Joining us today in the audience is Sophie, and she's a scholar in the Data Design for Development program here at the Leaders of Africa Institute. Sophie, you raised your hand. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Violet. Hello, everyone. I just want to continue. Nice to see you again, Peter. Eva.
Good to see
I just
you.
want to continue respect to Valentine's said about admission policy, admission aspirations, and orientation. We find that most students don't know the demands for admissions in higher education, and that kills their aspiration. I'll give you an example. I work with the Faculty of Agriculture and also the Faculty of Education. And the major requirement for admission into Faculty of Agriculture is biology and chemistry, of which an entrance exam is being sat for. But a student leaving the advanced level knows that, okay, I have geography, maybe I did geology. As such, I have aspirations in the field of agriculture, but getting admission, you realize that you are stuck. You cannot get in there. They'll tell you that without biology and chemistry, there's a lot of sciences here. And we have also found students with a bachelor's degree in economics from the Faculty of Social and Management Sciences, who think that because they have a background in economics, they can do agricultural economics, but they cannot have access. And at one point, I asked the former dean that, why will you have an in-depth knowledge in economics, a degree, and you cannot do agricultural economics? And she said that, no, they don't make policies because they want to hinder students. They have done a sample, and the two that they recruited could not find it difficult to graduate because it's so scientific. They are training agricultural engineers, and so they need some background in biology and chemistry. And these samples made them to understand that these students could not cope, even with the background in economics. They need more. They would prefer students who have a background in biology and chemistry. They could easily get into economics, agricultural economics, than those with the background in economics. So you see that I've seen that orientation really at the level of secondary education, for them to know their aspiration, and then orientate them on what they can do, the subjects they can focus on, and have an in-depth knowledge so that they can meet their aspirations at the level of higher education. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. And I would like to just follow up with what Sophie said and hear from one of the panel members if anybody has a response to that, particularly Dr. Mccomb. Oh, I do see your hand up, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to really agree with what Dr. Ngalim is saying, specifically with this whole issue of prerequisites. Like, I always like to use myself as an example with my students, because I was an art student, and I studied computer science because I went out of the country. So I was opportune to be able to study something that normally I would not even be necessarily admitted into that area of interest in a university in Cameroon. But I was able to take it all the way to a doctorate. So it goes back again to that idea of thinking that we know people's capabilities so early on. We don't. As a matter of fact, I see with my students that do have physics, mathematics in A levels, even A's in all of them, are not the best performers in the computer science in attaining a degree. So we have this idea that so early on we know. And nowadays, with technology that's out there and all the knowledge that's out there, the truth is that you really can learn anything at any time. So the idea is just, can you get somebody to have the necessary prerequisites to be able to do whatever it is they want to do? I refuse to believe that even right now I cannot go be a medical doctor. Why not? If I have to start from 1 + 1, then I start there. Maybe I need 3 or 4 or 5 different prerequisites before I get to where you are. Maybe you don't need them and you can go further on. But the idea that I cannot do what I want to do and I have to do something else because society somehow thinks that based on some sampling that they did of some people I've never met is going to hinder me from doing something, I think is really hurting a lot of our youths because they want to do something. They are passionate about something, but the world thinks they can't. And who's to say that for you to do something, you have to have A+ in it? We know, if all of us are honest with ourselves, we know that our classmates who are doing the best today, we're not the best in class when we're growing up. We're not the best. Most of the time, they were the average students. We ended up excelling. So there is nothing that says it's all about how much time you're able to put in and how much effort. So it's about looking at, when you're looking at a child, what is the interest? What are they passionate about? Because if you're passionate about something, you will give it your all. And that's what we're looking for, the passion, and not so much that so-called early qualification. Because the truth is, when you go in, you do agricultural economics or information technology or whatever, you're not going to be doing what you did in high school. You're not going to be doing what you did in secondary school. In fact, when you go into the workplace, you may not even be doing exactly what you studied in class. It will all be foundational anyway. So I think that it really hinders. I really have to agree with him a lot that it really stops a lot of our kids from being able to attain their passion and do what they want to do.
Wow, that's really, really profound. Dr. Etta, please have your say, and then Dr. Shaibo can go after you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Violet. In my opinion, I don't totally disregard prerequisites. I think that previous knowledge is very important for advanced knowledge to build on. But my point is, or as I see it, is having a broader based education, have an opportunity where even those who do not meet the requirements have the opportunity to acquire them, to develop them, and even try on what they want to do. So yes, those prerequisites can be there, but it should not be in a way that restricts. I think that Dr. Mccomb presents a very good example, because it's been my discourse really lately, that what happens, the worst of our classmates, as indicated by teacher scores, when we mark, we give people certain statuses. So I think the worst of my classmates are medical doctors in the United States. So what is happening? That those same people will not even have the opportunity to read anything close to science, let alone health science. They will not have the opportunity. I am equally a science student. I came from a science background. I read biology, chemistry, mathematics. Today I'm in educational sciences because I didn't have physics to do what I wanted to do. But I think that, yes, I am excelling here. But what about the people who could not go through this challenge? Who did not have the resilience or have the support that I had to be able to go through that? Dr. Abdul is my classmate. He knows I was not the best student in class, but I had to do a lot to get to where I am. And the individual's ability is therefore important and critical in the learning process. So we cannot begin to determine their futures based on certain and very few criteria. There are just too few indices that are being used for admissions in our universities. It's about subjects, it's about points. But what about the individual's ability? What about the individual's interest? What about the individual's passion? What about the individual's needs and maybe hopes for the future? All of these things, I think, matter. Dr. Mccomb also alluded to the fact that this tracking starts right from when you are in Form 3. Form 3 is the first 3 years of secondary school. So already you start choosing whether you are science or art, and this shapes your future 5 years later, or let me say 4 years later, when you're entering into the university. Because like I said, if you have done arts already in Form 3, there is no way they are admitting you into any science program in any university in Cameroon. That is a fact. Except you are buying it under the table. Nobody is admitting you into any science program. If you have done science, yes, science is the most difficult and arts is very easy. So you may find your way in the arts. So it may be easier for you to get into any art subject. But if you have an artistic background, nobody is letting you try the sciences.
all of these limits and narrows access for students into universities. We are competing with mates who are achieving the most just because their environments are different. And I don't think that our environment should limit our abilities or limit our opportunities to excel at our best. Thank you.
Please go ahead, Dr. Shaibo, and have your say.
Okay. The problem of prerequisite, as I noticed in the system, is not because at times the system want to put some of those prerequisites. It's because of limited resources. For example, 1,000 students want to get in a program. The capacity of that program can only hold 100. So the system comes out with some conditions to look at people who are more capable of doing the program. That's one of the arguments that we can say, because the admission at the University of Buea has been relaxed when we had University of Buea. For people who are in the system, they will attest to that. Then the issue of program too, it really does matter. I had an opportunity to teach the IB program, the AP program, and the advanced level. So when you want to admit student who had a background in the IB program, he has no problem. He can get into the sciences, can get to the art because their program is inclusive. But when somebody has advanced level, for example, you have done the sciences, it's difficult for you, or you have done the arts, it's always difficult for you to get into the sciences. Somebody with no background in biology want to do veterinary medicine and all the like. With all those things, there's always restriction. Even out of the country, permit me to say that if you want to do veterinary medicine, they must ask you requirement for biology, at least even at the level of the ordinary level, even if you don't have it at the level of the advanced level. So some of those prerequisite knowledge is really, really necessary. But the criteria for admission in our state university here is because of limited resources. Everybody wants to do accounting. Accounting department can only admit 100 students, 10,000 wants to do it. So they will say, for you to get into accounting, you need advanced level economics and advanced level mathematics. There is going to solve some of those problems. So those are some of the observations that are found in the system, which is not because the system really wants to do that, it's because of unlimited resources. Thank you.
Indeed. And joining us today in the audience is our Director of Research, Dr. Eva Penner. Please have your say. And for the rest, we will get to you in a moment. Eva, please unmute yourself and have your say.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, when you guys were talking, I was also reflecting on my own experience in Ghana. This is actually the same problem that we also have in Ghana, where you choose a course and you go to the university and you don't get it and they give you something else. And also, you made mention of the fact that if you don't study a particular program in secondary school, like say if you're a science student and you want to change to general arts, sometimes that one is easy. If you're a science student and you want to go to general arts courses, it's much easier. But when you're a general arts student or visual arts student or even business student and you want to take a science course, it's actually difficult. And I was actually reflecting on this has to stem from the fact that we've structured our secondary education in such a way that we are actually limiting people right at the secondary level before they actually get to the university level. So this is something that we have to actually confront. And in doing so, we have to introduce a more generalized subject where the student have hands-on on every studies from science to physics. At the end of the day, then in their third year, they decide what they want to do. And this will help them to actually plan ahead when they go to the university. And it's something that I've seen here actually being in the US, because I have friends that they general arts in Ghana and they come here and they are doing medicine. And you are thinking, if you're in Ghana and you come here and you want to do medicine, there's no way you can do medicine. But when they came here and they did like a little bit of high school education, they had opportunity to take various classes and they settle on the one that they want. So that gave them the exposure to a lot of things. And I think that is one thing that is really, really limiting us. Because for instance, I was interested in business related courses and actually did business. But when I applied to the university, I didn't get into business administration because they said that I didn't get like A in certain courses. you know. So I was given even economics, and even the fact that I got economics, I was given history, I was given religion. These are subjects that I never study, and these are subjects that I was not interested in. But I ended up doing it. At the end of the day, I dropped all of them. And right now I'm doing an MBA program. I'm back to what I want to do. So I just feel like, as you guys have said, there's a lot of people have various interests and the talent is there, but it also depends on how we are grooming people, and also we also spoke about limited resources and things like that, which are factors. But I think that we are in the 21st century. A lot of opportunities are open. A lot of programs are coming up. There's advanced technology and things like that that we can incorporate in our studies. Right now, there's online education that is going on, that if you have about 2,000 people in the class, they can separate them and do synchronous or asynchronous classes and make leverage of some of these courses so that students may have experience, who have the opportunity to explore all the various courses, and at the end of the day, they settle on one. I think that would be something that we have to think about. And I personally, anytime I'm thinking about my professors, I also feel like my professors are actually doing well with the limited resources they have. You know, they are teaching about 1,000 students, they have to grade them, they have to do all these things, but they try their best. So I think the whole system, especially in our educational system, we need to change it from the bottom up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eva. I want to, not necessarily move on from this subject, but just highlight a couple of key questions on the Higher Education Aspiration Survey that are touching on some of the key things that are being raised. So if your hand is raised in the audience, and I saw Dr. Etta, your hand was raised there, we're going to come to you in just a moment. But I want to share my screen here and share some of the questions that relate to this on this national survey that Dr. Etta is leading. So let me share my screen here briefly. So as you can see on your screen, these are some of the featured questions on the Higher Education Aspiration Survey. So these questions ask for students to share what was their present program of study, and also to share at the time of applications which programs they plan to apply to. So those are the three that they put as sort of their top choices. And then also the survey asked them, what are the three main reasons that these programs were attractive to them? So one of the hopes is to understand what is shaping the selection process, some of the things that we've been just talking about. But I want to highlight actually two questions here that are relevant to this conversation we're having here. And this is this issue of switching, of adapting in the context of a higher education institution. And on Dr. Etta's Higher Education Aspiration Survey, there are two questions, or there are a couple additional questions as well, but these are the two main questions, which is, did you attempt to switch your program after being admitted? So one of the things that we're interested in is how many students are trying to switch their majors in some way, right? Switch their program in some way. And then if they did try and switch, how successful were they at switching, right? Was this a possibility, or were there hindrances? So we're thinking not just when students are getting into university, but after they've gotten into university. And Dr. Etta has pointed out to us earlier that many students will accept that program that they may not want to be in with the hopes of switching after they've once they've been admitted to the university. So I want to talk about this issue, because this is really fundamental to this conversation that we're happening now about getting locked into choices and the availability of switching or adapting in the context of an institution. And I want to go to you, Professor Mccomb. You mentioned this topic as well. And I'm curious, do you see a lot of students that you know and that you have experience with attempting to switch their dominant sort of area of study when they get to university, and what makes them successful or not successful when it comes to those attempts to switch?
Well, in my university, yeah, we do see that a lot. A lot of students come in for one thing, and then in the first year or maybe in the second year, usually in the first year or second year, they want to switch to something else. Sometimes it's even within the same faculty, but a different program. So a student might be in accounting and want to switch to banking and finance, or a student might be studying cybersecurity and wants to switch to software engineering or something like that. And it's almost like abroad, where you get into university undecided, And then sometime later on, you decide. It's just that in our context here, you kind of have to decide before you really decide. So we do see that. We do see that a lot. Now, in a lot of the programs in our university, for example, it's a lot easier because of the fact that the first year, a lot of times, is foundational. So unless you're really, if within the same faculty, for example, it's not as bad. But if you're trying to go to a completely different faculty, then you might have a lot of what we call carryover courses that you did not validate, that you now have to take them. But some students are even willing to put in the extra time or even give an extra year to do what they really want, if they realize that, the path they're on is not really the path that they want. And we see that a lot with some of the fields that where students got in, maybe not because they really wanted to. I think I'm free again.
We can still hear you. We can still hear you. You are a little bit frozen, but we can hear you. Now we can hear Dr. Mccomb. Just wait 1 second here. All right. As she's coming back here, I noticed there were a couple of hands in the audience here, and I want to bring them in. But first, before doing that, any other additional comments on this? Professor Valentine, do you have any other sort of comments to say about students attempting to switch either in or out of programs at the University of Buea? We can't hear you. You're on mute. There we go. We can't hear you, or at least I can't hear you. I think the mic. Yes, I think we can hear you now. No, we can't. I think there's an issue with your headphone right now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay. Yes, I'm saying that it's very recurrent for students to switch, especially when they come without really having a very clear career orientation. And things are often made very easy to them. But when you are within the same faculty, it works so well. But if you have to switch now to another faculty, then you have to go and take it from square one. You have to go and begin then. But which, to me, it isn't so much of a problem, because what it is more of your attitude towards your area that takes you up, that gives you an altitude. It's not necessarily your aptitude. It's your attitude towards what you want to be that will give you an altitude. And I have several examples to justify my hypothesis. Some of them are listening to me and they should be smiling. Persons with whom I studied philosophy, and who were no way as any science students. They are IT engineers in the United States of America. And these are examples I use to justify my thesis. So you shouldn't be very sure of what a child is going to become. So let this flexibility hold. And I accepted what Dr. Etta was saying about broad-based. We shouldn't allow them to specialize so early. I carried out education in a secondary school where we weren't even allowed to specialize so early in Form 3. You were expected to do some sciences right to Form 5. You were expected to do some sciences right to Form 5. And it is in lower seed where you may have to even pick some of them. That is because they understand that maybe you don't even know what to do. And then there's what is called an aptitude test that could also be taken before a program. Because we shouldn't think only about people having results from certificates like the General Certificate of Exams. There are many circumstances that may warrant a student's performance. And a student can always catch up. And if this aptitude test is taken, you may see that we have a different student. There are some who come to the university before they have a breakthrough to what they want to study. So those are some of the things I have to say.
Thank you, Professor Valentine. And joining us in the audience today, we have Sam. Sam, you did have your hand raised. Please feel free to unmute and have your say.
All right, thank you. I just wish to chip in something regarding 2 points which were raised. First, the number of intake, and secondly, the criteria for admission. That has also been a concern for me regarding our universities in Cameroon. Okay, my suggestion is that I think universities could, each faculty could create an exam where they test the student's aptitude to see if the student is fit, because it will serve no purpose to admit students, then one or two students are dragging the entire class behind. So, but if a test is, an aptitude test is performed, for example, say you're talking about economics and saying maths is not a prerequisite, which is good, but that student should be able to, to meet up with the requirements, which definitely the program director should come up with a kind of test prior to. So that's my suggestion. Secondly, with this issue of admitting a very large number, it's really a hindrance, because when you look at my mates, for example, most of them will switch from one program to the other. But each time you find out why did you switch, I think almost all the reasons I get is the course was so difficult. Whereas the exact reason at that particular age should be maybe what I'm studying is not aligning with what I'm doing. So I see it as irrelevant. So in that case, you realize that students are going in for what is cheaper. Whereas I really don't think something is cheaper in the sense of it, because you actually go in at the university level to study what you want to do in life. So if the concerned or the administrators could take that into consideration, that will help a lot. And lastly, this may be, I don't know if it ties here, but I just wonder how effective teaching can be when there are up to even more than 200 students. Meaning that somebody could find themselves in a class by chance and will see the importance of studying that subject. And they could still as well discover themselves there. But then if there are 3,000 of you in a class, I don't just understand. But like I say, I don't know if it's a topic for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, go ahead, Violet.
No, those are very interesting points that Sam raised, because I know that some of the points that were raised earlier were about students maybe not wanting to do a particular program, or maybe were not very informed about the program and then choosing to switch because their motivation was low. And Sam raised a very interesting perspective of where a student actually drops the program, not because they were not interested in the program or motivated, but because in their opinion, the program was hard. So that raises a very interesting perspective that I hadn't yet thought about. And I don't know if Dr. Etta has something to say about that. However, on the point of trying to handle very large numbers of students in the class, I'm very interested in what the panel has to say about this, because I'm curious as well.
And that was also, as you saw in the video that we shared earlier, that was the thing that the students were emphasizing.
Right.
Number one, the classes are too big. And number two, I can't hear my professor in front of the room unless they have that big booming voice. So yes, absolutely. Dr. Etta.
Yes, Prof. True, Violet. The numbers are alarming and disturbing too, because when the class size is too large, the debates are there. Research, the findings from research are mixed when it comes to whether large class sizes improves performances or not. The research findings are mixed. But I've had the experience where I've taught a class of 500 students. And I used to teach that class as 48 students. I used to have 48 students in that class, and then the numbers grew to 500. And when I used to teach that class as 48 students, I gave them all sorts of tasks, and it was enjoyable. I will give them a reading assignment, and I'll be able to evaluate that reading assignment. We will go and do some video, we'll do some dramatization, we'll do all sorts of things. We can do that. When the class became 500, I couldn't do all these things. I had to resort to multiple choice questions, one that will allow me mark 500 in at least 1 week. So I couldn't. So truly, and I can imagine the students who get frustrated from the fact that they can't hear me loud enough. I'm naturally very loud, but I think that in a class of 500, I could be naturally very low. So I can imagine the frustration that will come from students who cannot hear me, or still students who cannot have a seat
to sit down. We end the slogan in my university. My university is tagged University of Buea, a place to be. And then I think from students' experiences, they added a section to this. And they now say a place to be when you are not there. It means before you come there, it's a place to be. But when you're there, you face the many challenges. True. These challenges are important to transition them into the future where they will meet even more. So it's a training process. But I think that sometimes the decry from students is something we should listen to, and it could really, really deter their learning. Some may drop out because no one is paying attention, and also because you, the teacher, cannot follow up. I couldn't follow up. I know colleagues too who couldn't follow up with such large classes because you can't follow up their learning. You do not even know who is who. And from my recent readings, I've come to realize for the number of years I have taught so far, I barely know who my students are. And this hinders learning. You cannot be teaching people whom you do not know. Then where is the inclusive education? Where is the education for all we are asking for? Where is the support for learning? If all students must be able to achieve at their best levels, then we should be able to meet them at their individual needs. It's not as easy as I say it, I know that. But when a class is smaller, you can know that, okay, this student is coming from a background where, for example, the parents is a single family, single parent home, and there are certain challenges that the child is bringing into the classroom, which matters. Psychologists tell us that it matters. The economists are telling us that the child's financial background matters for learning. And so you're asking them to get all the handouts and get all the things. So when we know this about the learners we are teaching, then truly we can support them to achieve these aspirations, to achieve these visions that they have about themselves. Of what use really is our teaching if at the end of the day, when Eva was speaking, I was reflecting, if at the end of the day, they do not achieve the dreams that they have. If you wanted to do a degree to become an accountant in 3 years, and it took you over 20 years to realize that truly you only wanted to become a medical doctor, then of what use? How is the educational system supporting you? We are losing out on so many resources when we do not adhere to the aspirations of learners. They lose time, we lose money in their investments, and they themselves lose their own interest in learning. So whichever way we look at it, and if we keep saying that these learners are too young to understand what they want to study, then we are going back to the time when we describe them as blank slates. Learners as young as 5-year-olds know what they want to do, and we don't take it for granted. I've seen some beautiful research findings from Australia, and they tell us that learners in the nursery classroom know what they want to become. Yes, they don't understand the pathway clearly, but they know exactly what they want to become. They are passionate about a certain kind of field, and if we can only support them, then we can get them to achieving those dreams. And this is our role. This is our role as educators.
Indeed. And Dr. Etta, when you were elucidating more on, how the large numbers affect the quality of education, and highlighting how some students can't hear you in the back and wondering how they'll get to understand if they couldn't even hear you, and you that the professor didn't even know your students, it had me wondering if our students even had a chance to begin with from the time that they walked in through those classroom doors, because if they couldn't hear you and you couldn't get to know your students, how then could we imagine that they even had a fighting chance in the first place? So that was really, really profound. And PC, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, says in the chat that I believe in a flexible setup of education. I believe in a flexible setup of education where students are given the opportunity to achieve their academic dreams, meaning they can switch to whatever faculty of their interest. For me, interest is the driving force. Education shouldn't be seen as a burden, but as an opportunity to achieve dreams. And yes, he does continue to say orientation as well has a lot to play as it helps clarify the path to their dreams. I agree. Thank you. Thank you for that comment.
Absolutely. And I love how in our conversation today, we're hearing sort of the professor's perspective, because all of us are professors and have been on the lecture side of the wall in a sense. And then we're hearing the student's perspective. But one of the beautiful things that we're hearing here is there's mutual interest on both sides here, right? Of creating a conducive environment that works both for lecturers and building that personal relationship with the students that is important to enhancing their education, as well as what the students want and what they and what they need to attain their aspirations. So I really love how we're coming together on some common sort of goals or common things and ways of approaching things. And before we sort of continue our conversation, I see Sophie has her hand up, as well as Stephen. I'm going to come to you in just a moment. I want to talk a little bit about this survey, because we've been mentioning about this national nationwide survey, the Higher Education's Aspiration Survey, and how it sort of fits into the conversation. Well, that survey is going to be talking about and discussing some of these issues with students, right? Asking students, what do they think? And from their point of view on some of these issues of admissions policy, some of these issues of switching their focus of study, these issues of their own aspirations and how their studies relate to their own aspirations. That's a core part of this survey. And I want to emphasize a couple of unique things about this survey, because I know we do have some students in there that will be participating in that survey. I want to share my screen just briefly here and just introduce you to the way in which this survey is going to be run a little bit. And this is what we call research in real life. And what does that mean? Well, it means something different from your traditional survey that you generally participate in. Because I know many of us have participated in surveys that academics or companies or other people have sent us. We fill out the survey, and then you never really know what happens to that data. You never really know, whether that research was released. You never got to follow the research process to see how it was done, to have that transparency and trust built in that research project. And research IRL is a way in which one does research to enhance public engagement, just as we're having conversations about these issues in a public forum, even in advance of the survey. Also to bring transparency for the way in which we do research and we share that research. And I just shared throughout this session some of Dr. Etta's questions on the survey. So some of the things that you can expect to see during this survey in the next few weeks as it rolls out across the country of Cameroon is a few things. Number one, live updates of the survey. So you get to see things, in real life or in terms of the updates on the survey. You're going to get to hear updates from those who are leading the survey, including Dr. Etta herself, to talk about the results as they come in to the survey, to talk about what some of the patterns that are emerging. So you'll be able to follow that. And there'll be sessions, including live events such as this, that are going to be reflecting on the data as well as the rollout across the country over the next few weeks. And the place to follow all of this, as well as to fill the survey when it opens, and it opens this Monday, is leadersofafrica.org/aspirations. So really easy for everyone to remember, because we've been talking all about aspirations. It's leadersofafrica.org/aspirations. So this is a unique way of doing research. You're going to be able to view the data, some of the data in real time in a data dashboard that will reflect responses that are coming in real time across the country. So if you have questions about Research IRL or the Leaders of Africa Institute that is helping Dr. Etta conduct the survey, feel free to put those in the chat. But I want to go now to some of the hands that were raised. So I wanted to emphasize this because obviously we want you to be informed. We want this to be a starting point to discuss those results. But I see there are some hands up in the chat, and I want to go to those. I want to go to Stephen first. Stephen, do you hear me? And can you unmute yourself if you don't mind? Why don't you share and have your say? There you go.
Hello, good evening, sir. Yeah, Stephen can hear you. Can you hear me, sir?
Absolutely.
Yes, we can.
Hello. It's a privilege joining this group of very learned men and women. Thank you for giving me the opportunity just to share one or two things. Thank you especially to Dr. Valentine Galim, because I think it's with his initiative that I can join this program, or that I even know about what is going on. It's such a complex and interesting topic under discussion here. And why do I say that? I think there are lots of when you look at Africa, for some reason I'm not in Africa, but when I look back at my country, I think that the government and the students need a lot of orientation as far as their future. Or the future of their citizens. Now, this is for the government, the future of their citizens and the students themselves. They need a lot of orientation as far as choosing what they want is concerned. Now, I think the government is a bit smart there, because each time, I mean, I grew up in Cameroon myself. I also face those challenges where you cannot do this subject or that subject, you cannot do this discipline or that, because they have, in a very crafty way, put some criteria. Now, why do they put those criteria? I see that as a way of maybe protecting themselves. Why? Because they believe, and I think that is where people of your caliber, you need to challenge the government too in whatever you're discussing here. The government believes that everybody who goes into into the university, they are going to come back to them to employ them, and because they are going to come back to them for employment. That is their thinking. We don't have the capacity. We don't have the money. So let's look for a way of discouraging these kids. And they put all those barriers there, to frustrate the kids. Now, what is our role? Maybe our role is to challenge the government to change their mindset. Not just to challenge the government, but equally to challenge the students we teach. Because somehow the system has made the students to think that you go to school to be employed by the government. We need to change that mindset and get the students to understand that you go to school to create employment for yourself. Now, when students start thinking from that direction, that I'm not going to school to be employed by the government, I'm going to school to create opportunity or to learn and to look for opportunities to employ myself. I believe that all this talk about, you don't need RE, you need maths. I mean, nobody's going to take it seriously. The students themselves are not going to take it seriously. They are going to fight to get what they want based on their understanding that they would employ themselves. I mean, you look at the West, for example. I have my mates in this country. I'm calling from England, or I'm participating from England. I have my mates in this country who have become nurses. Now you look at their background, they have nothing to do with science. Nothing to do with science. Equally, you have others who have joined certain professional, career in this country, which does not in any way or do not in any way reflect what they did in the secondary school or in the high school. So I think all these frustrations that are meted on the students in Cameroon are just the government trying to shield themselves from their, from their weakness or from their inability to create employment for students, and also maybe to stay in power for as long as they want to stay.
Mm-hmm. And Stephen, let me ask you a question. So from my position, in full disclosure, I'm a professor in political science. So I study issues of democracy, elections, and governance. That's my background, for those of you who don't know me. And one of the questions that I have for you, Stephen, in this conversation, I think it's come up in our conversation in indirect ways, is this issue of resources, is this issue of sort of the social, economic, climate and environment. what comes first in your mind, Stephen? A liberalization of, say, the job market, or liberalization in certain areas, or does the economy have to develop in a way that allows people to switch, that allows people opportunities outside of government, right? So what do we see? How do you see this? Is this something that can be done right now, that you feel like there are those opportunities outside of the public sector, or is that something that takes a bit of time to develop? Sounds like you think it's now, it's more immediate.
I think, when you look at the infrastructure in Cameroon, I think there are lots of, if you look at our infrastructure in Cameroon, especially, I think it's a bit lacking in many things. But I think there is a possibility that with our vast natural resources, the government could just relax things. I think the opportunities are there in my country in particular. It is for the government to take off that phobia, that fear factor, and liberalize. The opportunities are there. We don't need the government. But the students, I believe, just want to give us the opportunity to educate ourselves. Give us the opportunity. Don't hold back on that, because I think that is what is happening in Cameroon.
Thank you, Stephen.
Very interesting points from Stephen there. I'm interested in what the panel has to say. Professor Valentine, I would like to hear your thoughts about some of the points that Stephen has raised. And Stephen, again, those are very poignant points, and thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.
Professor Valentine, I think you're unmuted.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. He has touched one point that was escaping my mind, the idea of decolonizing the mentality. What we have in place is a colonial system of education. And what do I mean by that? These educational values do not meet the exigencies on the ground. Let me give a very simple example. We are in a university where we have schools of engineering, we have technical schools, we have schools of agriculture. Yet the university restaurant has to import food. The university university infrastructure is built by we have to import expertise to come and build a university. What is the engineering then? We could, within the university, we could create wealth in a chain, because he talked about vast resources. If we have a school of agriculture that produces, then we have what we call the College of Technology. It processes what the agricultural school produces, then this marketing takes it over, the School of Business, they take it over to the market, and that is how the whole chain comes up. I see the university, they're producing great wealth and making an impact in the society, employing hundreds of students and making the students more creative. Recently, I've been happy with some of the students who are able to use their expertise to market some of the little products themselves. They are very good ways of preserving some of these things that we have, and they market them, and those are little initiatives. But I'm thinking that this could be taken in a greater scale. So I'm thinking that we need to decolonize the mentality of the students as well. That's the point he has talked about a system, and I'm thinking the system is working from a certain colonial heritage that was handed over to them.
Yeah, and before Violet shares that also and gets other responses from our panelists, I found it very interesting at the beginning of our conversation, to your point, Professor Valentine, that you're describing Cameroonian education as an Anglo-Saxon education, right? And I was thinking about that. It's more than saying it's the British system. It's a system of a given people, the Anglo-Saxons, right? Of which is a very precise group of an ethnicity, in a sense, right? And so I think it harkens back to that reference point of that of the former colonial powers in the case of the UK here, and the importance of, as you said, decolonizing the curriculum as well as the economy more broadly as well. Over to you, Violet. Just wanted to make that point.
Indeed. I'm curious, Dr. Mccomb, I would like to hear your thoughts on some of the points that Stephen has raised and Dr. Valentine.
Sure, I'll try to speak a bit fast since my internet is really having a field day. Yeah, I'd have to agree with some of the points especially about the idea of decolonizing. I don't think it's a horrible thing to inherit a system, but as time goes on, you have to adapt the system to your own local context. So it's not so bad that we inherited a system. You have to start somewhere. Right? But now we have a system that is a lot of times not in alignment with what is the ground. Sometimes even in the curriculum and things that we're studying. For example, I'll take myself as an example. I'm teaching IT, and of course, if I went online, I went and got some notes on IT in order to use as a something to assist in my courses. The examples would all be from the US, from India, or something of this sort. It is up to me to now create local examples. It's up to me to now use the context I'm in to teach the same material, because the material is global. There's nothing wrong with that material, it's global. But then I have to contextualize it. I have to make it relevant where I am. So when I'm giving my students examples about, something with the computer system and buses, I'm going to give an example between Buea and Douala, not between New York and Toronto. So you have to contextualize. So I don't think there's any problem with us having inherited a system, but I agree with the decolonization in the sense that we have to now take systems and contextualize in our own environment. Cameroon is biggest in, I believe, agriculture. So yeah, maybe we're not doing any major processing, but maybe we're doing agriculture and then going from there. So I think that a lot of things that we can do locally in our universities, and even without the government. It's true the government a lot of times will facilitate. Governments a lot of times may even hinder, but a lot of things that we can work around. And I see many private universities but not maybe as much under the I would say the hands of the government as hard, making some strides in trying to do things a little bit differently. We see that right now, even with my university, the whole notion of entrepreneurship and bringing that front line and making that front and center, that students think more entrepreneurial and how they can take their products to market and not just end in a theoretical stage in the classroom. So I think it's okay that we inherited. I just think that now we need to contextualize even at the level of the courses, not even so much the entire program, but even at the detail of the courses, we need to contextualize. I think that would help.
Indeed. Dr. Shaibo, if you're with us, I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I will just speak. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So, I would just agree with Dr. Mccomb on what she said. There's really nothing wrong inheriting a system, but we need to really contextualize the system, because one of the challenges that we have in our higher education is there is no cooperation or relationship with the school and the business world. So that's where the problem is coming from, where students just go out after that, they think that the state must employ them, whereas they can as well work in the private sector. But because of that lack of cooperation between the business world and the higher education institution that is lacking, is always challenging, because even in the developed world, it is difficult to have faculty that was constructed by maybe a department of engineering or other things. When you look at our department of faculty of medicine, they're supposed to have teaching hospitals across the country, so that students will be able to practice their medicine, they were able to work there, but still we do most of the thing in theory, so the practical aspect is not there. So that is one of the things. Most of the thing we focus on theory, we don't practice them. So that relationship between the job market and the higher education institution is not there. If we can have that relationship established, I think that's going to solve most of the problem. Students will not be graduating thinking that they will only work with the state. They can also work with the private sector. Thank you.
Indeed. Sophie, I see your hand raised. Please unmute yourself and have your say.
Thank you. Maybe I'll draw us a little back, but let me continue from where my colleague stopped. With respect to our curriculum, and the job market. I would say with respect to that, the government has realized that since the 1993 reforms, and there are many reforms in higher education, the 2001, 2005, 2008. So I believe the problem is not that we have realized the issue of unemployment, but the issue is that there is over-dependency of public expenditure on state universities, and due to the fact that they want to fulfill the demand for education with respect to human rights to higher education. But if you look at our policies, all these things that we have just said are there. So the problem is not policy, the problem is the implementation of these policies. And like Dr. Etta said, the classes are too large that we cannot adopt. The higher education has adopted a student-centered approach to learning, where students are supposed to take part in their learning, do practical work, but where the labs are limited to respect.
I think we lost Sophie there. And maybe
No, we can hear her. It was
okay.
It was working. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. So the labs are very few, and practical rooms are very few with respect to the population of students that we have. And we realize that enrollment is increasing at an exponential rate while the infrastructure remains constant. But if you look at Dr. Mccomb talked about the College of Technology, the Faculty of Engineering and Agriculture, which are points of interest for the government. They write an entrance exam and their class sizes are limited, as such they can actually acquire these practical skills. So we realize that students from these various faculties, those that have the aspiration, the passion for what they are doing, they're actually excelling in the private sector. And I will continue before this point that I wanted to just build on. I look at admission and employment for graduates. Most graduates, when getting into the university, they are just excited. I want to go to the university. Like UB, like Dr. Etta said, UB is a place to be. Everybody just wants to go to UB, but they don't know what is ahead. And when they come in, they meet the challenge. Sometimes it's not even because you see a student who applied for a program, so our first choice was taken. But towards the end of the semester, he wants to change because he has faced some challenges. There are students who get, last year I had about 3 students, one from Faculty of Law, one from Agriculture itself, I think the other from Education. We did the same education, trying to change discipline, knowing that this course is so difficult, I don't think I can push through. And the fact that the class sizes are too large, these are classical faculties. The ministry tell me classical faculties, that is non-professional faculties, that they want to make them professional. And so the class sizes are very large that you cannot even attend to these students to try to encourage them and ask them where their challenge is all about, and to tell them that you can do it. Others have done it. Why can't you do it? And sometimes they become frustrated. I'll tell you that a parent talked to me last week that he knows that the daughter has graduated. Unfortunately, that child has been in university for 3 years and is doing so many courses, and because of challenges, she just decided to abandon and could not even have the courage to tell even her own parents. As such, they lack that motivation even to be resilient for them to push through these various challenges. And lastly, these students don't look into the job market. One of our colleagues here, I can't remember the person, talk about employment opportunities. They don't look at the job market. They just want to do something that is simple. As such, after graduation, they see that, okay, the private sector don't need these skills. The only way I can gain financial security is through government employment, and they start writing concours and all that. But when the government built universities, the first university in 1962, their major objective was to train administrators. As such, they did not look at the needs of the private sector. But in the 1993 reforms came to reform higher education, to link higher education institutions with the labor market. But because of the population, these skills cannot be acquired. But students now, we have differences with respect to income background. Students who have the income power, the financial power, get into private universities that are more expensive, and the class sizes are small, and they could actually get these skills, and they go there. But there are others who have these aspirations. But if I want to do accounting, University of Buea cannot admit me in accounting. My parents don't have the money to send me into a private university where I could actually do accounting, and they send me to do something like special education. I don't know what is special education. It was never my aspiration. I'm just there because I want to get a degree. And after a degree, sometimes they cannot even move up to the level of a master's degree because they don't have that motivation. They don't have that passion for what they are doing. Thank you.
Those are very, very interesting comments that you raised, Sophie. Thank you so much for those comments. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Dr. Mccomb, about Sophie's comments about the private versus public universities.
I think that I agree with her in the sense that the population does hurt the level of the public universities. Last week, I was at a competition at Orange Digital Center, and I actually ran into a professor from University of Buea. He had a student competing in one of the teams, and I had two students competing in another team. And so our teams competing practically against each other in a competition at Orange. And so it takes, I know that even in the public universities, some of the departments are making those efforts to get the students to get involved with industry, either in the form of competitions or in the form of internships that follow through with them and so on. So it is difficult based on the population. And in the smaller, in the private sector, like university like ours, there are things that we do beyond what a public university would do. Like when we send a student on internship, we actually go to visit the student on internship and meet with the supervisors and discuss their skills and discuss the needs and discuss the things we can do within our curriculum and actually influence some of the types of projects we're giving students to work on as part of the course material. It's influenced even some of the topics that we pick, especially in a field like ours that is constantly changing. We're always changing the content, not so much the topic, the title of the course, but the content and different kinds of projects or different kinds of programming languages and things like that that we're using. So that ability to be able to get to that level. Another thing that was also mentioned, also very important now, is the level of distraction that exists for the youth. I was talking about in the Southwest, Northwest, and the crisis and so on. There's so many kids that are so distracted with the days they can't go to school and all those kinds of things. It's really affecting learning. And students who are now in the public universities face that much more than those in the private universities, because at the private level, we can deal with them one-on-one. We turn into counselors, we turn into coaches. We talk about their family problems. We talk about the difficulties in the home. I have a student who basically wanted to leave the house because his parents wanted him to cook every day and he had no time to even do his homework. So there are all kinds of problems at all kinds of levels. And in the private universities, we are able to talk to our students about things like that. In the public universities, it's a little bit difficult. So I can understand that.
Yeah, I wanted to build on that. And I know we're coming up against the end of our session here in just a few minutes. And we're going to get to you, Faye, in just a moment. But that issue that you just mentioned, Professor Mccomb, of student support. And Dr. Etta, as she was preparing the survey and thinking about the survey, some of the things that students shared were about this issue of insecurity in the country and how that's influenced their education, which is seemed very profound and very influential, and also student support. And you can imagine that, as you just mentioned, there's overlap between student support and sort of these feelings of insecurity or supporting students in their environment. So I want to go around the panel here and talk about that. In your view, what are some of the things that are being done at your institution to support students? Purposeful ways in which yourself or your department or your university is engaging with students and providing student support. So I want to start off with what is being done. And the second part of that we want to hear about is what are some of the gaps in student support from your perspective as a faculty member, as an administrator. So I want to start with you, Professor Valentine. Why don't you share first? You're on mute.
Yeah, with regard to the gaps on student support, we have problems. I think I want to look at it from the perspective of inclusive education, because I'm very particular with regard to that. I'm doing educational justice. I think in our context, we really lack either the human or the material resources to be able to meet up with the exigencies of students with disabilities in particular, and not only students with disabilities, but those in need. Because when we talk about disabilities, we may think of a particular group of people, but there are some with certain needs that may not be visible. So we really have great challenges with regard to some of these issues. But at the same time, I am also looking at it from, I'm getting inspiration from a certain philosopher, Alfred North Whitehead, who thinks that there is no general education which is not technical, and there is no technical education which is not general. What am I saying in this case? I'm thinking that every area of studies should be able to build the necessary skills of survival for a particular student. And if this is done, then we may not even fall back to some of the problems that we encounter. So some of the gaps are that we don't have the possibility to build the necessary skills that are required for survival in the students. If a student is, I will take my example, I did philosophy in the Catholic University in Yaoundé, and there I had to pay a lot of money, and I was asked by my landlord why I had to pay so much money to study philosophy. Because he thought I was going to, I told him I just wanted to be intelligent. And when I'll be intelligent, every other thing will follow. And I have been, from my experience, I've been able to reap the fruits. I have been able to get into other fields without, I think the Catholic University was able to build in me the necessary skills that permitted me to enter into other areas of research and practices. And that has been very fulfilling. I am very happy I did that. And those are some of the gaps I think we need to think about. Thank you.
Absolutely. Dr. Etta, how about yourself? What do you see in terms of the gaps, not only the gaps, but also what is being done purposely now? Like, what are the efforts ongoing now in your view?
Okay, I think for the University of Buea, like someone mentioned at the beginning, I think that was Dr. Haji. He said, if you do not have English language, you're unable to, you will not be admitted into the University of Buea. Due to the crisis, that clause has been taken off. So we have opened access, we have widened access for students, because we know that students are having lots of challenges with the crisis, and they may not be able to end this particular requirement. And it may further take, already the English-speaking region is going through a crisis, and if we add more stringent requirements like that, it may put us at a loss in comparison to the other regions, the French-speaking region. So that is a very good initiative that has been taken by the University of Buea. So we don't have that. I don't know whether for the other Anglo-Saxon university, University of Bamenda, whether they still hold on to English. So that's one of the things that the university has done. I think that the university equally has also given, in terms of practices, has also given the students the opportunity, extended deadlines, so to allow them be able to catch up with their needs and catch up some of the requirements. For example, deadlines for registration has been extended, and the University of Buea, when I was snooping around to understand the practice of assigning students to courses programs they never applied for. One of the things, responses I got from the stakeholder was that the University of Buea is trying to admit almost all the students who apply, or a majority of the students who apply, so that they don't stay out there and join the armed groups, or become recalcitrant or join some violent group in the society. So I think that, again, opening admission may be some of the ways. But of course, the gaps remain. And why we have opened up admission, why we have expanded access, we know that there are still students who have been displaced. And because they are displaced, they have to go and study in a language that is not primarily their language. English is still not primarily our language, but at least we're better in it than French, talking about these crisis areas. So that is really difficult. And I don't see what the university is doing, as educational stakeholders to be able to solve that. Another very huge gap is on this when they call for lockdowns. Due to the armed conflict, there are calls for lockdowns. We can't go to school, or maybe we have an explosion in school. We are all scared of going to school. The question is, what next? The what next is left in the hands of teachers. And we can look at it both ways, what is being done and the gap. What is being done is that teachers will take their personal initiative to maybe do one or more online lessons and so on and so forth. But where is the formal education in all of this? Because I have one teacher teaching on WhatsApp, another one teaching on Telegram, another one teaching on Google Classroom, another one teaching, and there is just no, we don't have a learning management system that allows us to follow up these students, make that learning formal. I don't know how best I can explain this, but it presents itself as a good thing that we are doing, but also it may be further pushing more students to the wall. I got a student who was saying, I was just trying to put on my phone, and then I saw that I have 100 messages from WhatsApp, which are lesson notes and exchanges have come in. How am I supposed to catch up with 100 messages? So we have these kinds of things happening, and in a time of crisis, it's not the best solution. The one that we can go with is Dr. Mccomb's field, getting into technology, so we can start thinking about online learning. But we need learning management systems. COVID-19 has been around since 2019, and we are still looking at places. Infrastructures are not changing to allow for online learning, and COVID-19 doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. And it is even more complex with the crisis, when even in classrooms we see bullets passing left and right, people have been killed. So it's a really complicated situation. It is difficult, I think, for the government, but there is much more that can be done, even from our own ends as educators.
Wonderful. But since we're going to close in just a few minutes here, I did notice that Phi had their hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself and share? And maybe I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. If you don't mind sharing your name as well, that would be wonderful.
Thank you very much. I'm Phi Lilian.
Nice to meet you, Phi.
It's my pleasure. I'm a lecturer in the University of Buea and also the head of the Department of Guidance and Counseling. I want to really thank Dr. Valentine Galim for sending the link. I did not know about it. I joined later, but I've heard a lot. I just want to indicate that some of the problems we have in the higher education may not really be limited to the issue of curriculum, but the way some teachers teach. We can have a good curriculum, but what about the teaching methods? I know some people have already mentioned about the issue of theory. Yes, we have mostly theoretical. Do we really teach in a way that learners can use the knowledge, they can transfer that knowledge when they graduate from school? That is a question, and that is a problem that we are facing. Then, when we also look at this issue of intelligence, most teachers do not consider this multiple issue of intelligence. Some to classes, they think that a student can only perform well by passing a written exams. That is a call for concern. We have very good programs in the University of Buea, but the problem is the implementation, just like some of the speakers said. There is a program in the Faculty of Arts on performing and visual arts. To me, it's a program that can give a lot of opportunity to create jobs. But I'm always surprised to see that during admissions, we have just like 10 students in that particular program. So there are so many things in our higher education that really needs, maybe we need to look at them seriously. Then just you asked about some of the challenges, like Valentine said, we have problems with, let me say, human resources and material resources, especially when it comes to this issue of inclusive education, because we are encouraging inclusivity. But when you get to most of our university, we have students who are visually impaired, those with hearing impairment, but the people teaching there do not have knowledge of how to teach some of these learners. So at the end of the day, it becomes a serious problem. How do you really teach them? And if you teach and there is no effective learning, then there is a problem, because the end product of teaching should be learning, and the learners should be able to use that knowledge. Though there are certain things that the government and the school authorities have been doing, at least to improve on this situation, but they have been trying to train lecturers on how to be inclusive in their teaching. We also have resource centers where some of these learners with disability could have some materials that can help them. And I'm happy, as Dr. Etta was talking about the issue of online learning. That is what the University of Buea really struggled to do during this crisis period. But to tell you the truth, I don't think we can say that we succeeded up to 30%, because the management system, it's so difficult in a way that some students do not even get to access information from there. At times you send notes, you try to lecture, students are in areas where there's no network, there's no electricity. So it's really a serious issue. So I just wanted to share with you people, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I saw your hand, Professor Mccomb, was up there. So why don't you share, and then we'll sort of we'll close out our session today.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to share two things, picking up from what Dr. Etta was talking about with the learning management system. And as UB probably knows, or some people at UB being our mentor, the Catholic University Institute of Buea, we actually instituted online learning because of the crisis, because we had a lot of students who will be stuck at home and not able to go to school. And we wanted to be able to continue with lectures and delivery. So we were fortunate that by the time COVID came around, we already had an instituted learning management system, and we're able to actually just go fully online from a hybrid model. And today, we are still doing a hybrid model where students learn on site and online. And because of the fact that we have an actual learning management system used by all the faculty and all the students, both on the mobile phone or tablets and on the desktop, it's a whole lot easier for us to manage the learning and the students, and they're able to keep up with their studies. And then the second thing that I wanted to talk about was one of the things that our administration did a year ago or so, was to sort of have lots and lots of seminars with the students on this kind of growth mindset, and even changed our branding to a growth mindset university. And the idea was to get students to get away from that notion of fixed versus growth mindset, that notion of believing that you can only do certain things, or you were built to do certain things, or you can only do certain things because you did them in the past, and just believe more on passion and more on the ability. As long as you have a brain and it's functioning, there are very limited things that you can't do. So I think that those two things I wanted to point at, the fact that I was actually at the meeting with the ministry last year at the beginning of COVID, representing my university, and all the public universities were there. There was a lot of resistance to the online learning. And I remember University of Buea, I believe he was a VC who was there, And he was saying that we have a learning management system and we're good to go, all of that. But one of the things I wanted to point out to my colleagues there is that what we saw in our university starting so early on was that it has to be something institutionalized, and you must have two additional components. You must have a support unit and you must have a training unit. You need to have a training unit, those who train your faculty on how to build this material, how to put all this together. The students, not so much, because they're intuitive. They use WhatsApp and everything else. But if you have a learning management system, you need to train your faculty on that system. Then you need to have a support system where the students and faculty can fall back on to get help. If you don't have those two things in place, you can put the best system in the world. Nobody's going to use it. It's just going to be there gathering dust. And that's what we learned in our experience that I thought I could share.
Absolutely. And I think all of us who are generally tech savvy, I would say amongst our panelists, we're helping others, faculty members, navigate that world when COVID hit and going online, trying to teach some of our fellow faculty members how to work our LMSs and engage with students. So we will continue this conversation, but we're going to close now. I mean, the conversation is wide ranging today, but it's really important. And a lot of the issues that we are talking about are going to be issues, and as I've pointed out throughout today's session, on the Higher Education Aspirations Survey. So we've been talking all about the quality of education. There are questions, general questions about measures of quality, as well as what students see as the factors that influence quality, as well as other smaller questions. And the questions that were shared in today's session are the general questions. There are a lot of other sub-questions that are asked on the survey. And I want to encourage everyone here, whether you're a faculty member, to share with your students, or if you are a student, to participate and share with your friends and those that you know about this Higher Education Aspirations Survey. It is a nationwide survey in both English and in French, as the video pointed out. So it is a bilingual survey, so all areas of the country may participate. It opens in just a few days, on Monday, December 13th. So at the beginning of next week, the survey opens. And the data updates that will show the number of respondents across different universities and demographic data, that dashboard will start updating once 500 respondents have completed the survey. So right now, you'll just see on the page leadersofafrica.org/aspirations a picture that is there. That will be replaced by a data dashboard where we can all follow along with the research that will be ongoing. And so I encourage you to visit leadersofafrica.org/aspirations for information about the survey, as well as to watch Dr. Etta's video, and also to participate in the survey. So if you go to that page, let me see if I can pull that up here. If I can pull that up. Let's see, there we go. So if you go to that page, this is what you will find here. So you'll see the banner for the project, the video that we shared at the beginning, as well as where the data dashboard will be located. And then finally, the area where it says share your voice. And if you click on that button there, it will open the survey come December 13th. Dr. Etta, did you want to say anything before we conclude about the survey and participation as well?
Yes, Prof. Just to add that students are the center of learning. Really, it is not teachers. I don't think it is administrators, but all that teachers and administrators do is to get students learning. But what do students want? How can we support them to learn? I think that this is the centrality of the survey. And if we want to be able to support them as educators, as administrators, then it will be important to do so from an informed understanding of what they want, of what their own dreams are, of what their own voices, to hear their own voices. That's why I think that the aspiration survey is one which is very important, and I will request that my colleagues will encourage their students. We are looking at thousands of responses to help us come up with findings that can be generalized and findings that we can trust, that are valid. So it will be important. We are focusing just on undergraduate students for now. There is a lot that is emerging, and for colleagues who are interested, we can continue this kind of research. I'm thinking about a lot of things, growth mindsets for our students. I'm thinking about how can we support them through their challenges. I'm thinking about the needs for curriculum change, and lots of other things. So we can work together to make higher education in Cameroon not remain in the burden of our hearts, but truly become a reality, a center for change, a center where students can become our true future for Cameroon.
Indeed. Thank you, Dr. Etta. That was really profound. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Leaders of Africa Presents. Remember to visit leadersofafrica.org/aspirations to complete the survey beginning on Monday. And remember to follow the developments around the survey in the same place. Our conversation is the first of several conversations and updates as the research takes place. The purpose is to engage in the research before, during, and after the survey. We'll look forward to your engagement and thank you for a wonderful conversation today. Take care, everyone, and bye for now.
Thank you, everyone.